on recognition?
Good questions. So first, what we saw is that the more advanced the face recognition is, it's easier for our algorithm to fool it. Second, we're constantly learning and adapting to new algorithms and implementing them in our systems. And third, we are doing that. We have a red team that constantly forced to attack DID-protected photos. And then, before our algorithm produces a new DID-protected photo, it needs to fool our own red team's face recognition algorithm, which has the most DID photos went through it, so it's the strongest. Then that's why our algorithm constantly changes. And once we fool our own red team's face recognition algorithm, for sure, we will fool all other face recognition algorithms which are trying to overcome our protection.
But you have to maintain that it's human recognizable. So I could see over time it's going to become less human recognizable. Do you see that trend happening?
No, actually, it's not. The more face recognition algorithms are advanced, then the less changes we need to do before they say it's a different person.
As a consumer, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
As a consumer, I love the pitch. I'm like, this sounds great. Who are you selling to in these enterprises? What's their incentive outside of maybe CSR and being able to say they protect their users' data?
Okay, so just first, at the beginning, the vision for DID was for consumers. The vision was privacy for all. But really fast, we pivoted. We realized that who needs it the most are the organizations who suddenly found themselves storing such a big amount of biometric data, because all companies store photos. I can tell you exactly what each person in the organization wants. So security, information and security officers, they are in charge of this sensitive data, and they need a protection. Product managers, they want to increase revenues, make a better product. Marketing want to improve their branding as privacy leaders. Legal, they want to comply with the GDPR. Under the GDPR, face images are now considered not just personal information, but sensitive personal information. So that's basically it.
Do you have any enterprise customers today?
Any, sorry?
Enterprise customers.
Yeah. So our first customer, we just completed successful delivery to Cloudinary. They store photos of 350,000 companies, more than 22 billion media assets. Their customers need to comply with the GDPR. We're now starting a POC with one of the largest, one of the top players in the finance industry, a really big conglomerate. And then we also have a commercial agreement with one of the top automotive players, which automotive, eventually they'll need to protect pedestrians, which autonomous cars will capture, and that's a really big concern for GDPR and lawsuits.
So for all three companies, it seems like GDPR compliance is the #1 motivation for them to do this.
GDPR compliance also...
Everything else is nice to have, but very immediately want to be able to comply to that regulation seems to be the #1 motivator.
Yes, actually, one of them is really interested in our next product, which is also proprietary and disruptive, which will finish completes our vision and really fix the face recognition problem, is what we call DID++. And it will enable organizations using DID to still be able to authenticate their users.
Right.
And I'll explain in 20 seconds how it works. Basically, if iPhone 10, they will use it. So when you enroll, then we store the DID photo with instructions. Okay, then when you come to open the phone again, DID with the instructions know how to transform your face without storing it into the protected domain.
Right.
And then doing face recognition algorithm.
Yeah.
Then doing face recognition. Then if everything is stolen, no damage is done.
Right.
You can't go back to the real photo. That's going to disrupt the face recognition market.
That makes
really
sense.
going to fix the privacy issues.
So this is related to my question. There are legitimate uses that companies have for facial recognition. And if they apply DID to all the faces, then they're unable to use that internally as well. Is there and so what you're saying is then they have to buy your second product, right?
Yes.
Right.
So it's a great question.
Brilliant model.
That's a great question. So we thought about it. You know, at the beginning, we were like blocking face recognition. And then we got many requests from many banks, especially banks, and also governmental organizations, and also face recognition vendors. At the beginning, we told them, listen, we are doing the opposite. But then we understood they have the most pain because they are the most aware of the risks, GDPR, consumers' concerns, and they are aware about the it's like a double-edged sword. You want this data, you want face recognition, you don't want other organizations to hold it. So that's exactly what we made. We had a problem. We need to enable them to use face recognition while using, even though they use the ID, but we have two constraints. We're not going to decrypt the data. We're not going to reverse engineer it. It's not going to be a backdoor like once you DID it, it stays DID. And we solved it with DID++.
All right, give it up for DID. All right, we are bringing up our next startup, Pulte. Presenting for Pulte are Russ Markovsky and Ed Chow.
Tracking things is tough, yet in today's data-driven world, knowing the location of things is more important than ever. Take the logistics industry, where over 2.8 billion pallets are in circulation in the US at any given moment, but that 20% of those pallets go missing every single year, in addition to $30 billion worth of assets going missing. Today's trackers are too expensive. Batteries don't last, and they're just not reliable. Tomorrow's trackers need to be super cheap, have batteries that last, and work everywhere securely. The location market is huge and growing. By 2022, there'll be 29 billion connected devices that are looking for location. Market estimates have the outdoor location market, together with the indoor location market, worth $124 billion, growing at 30% every year. Introducing Pulte, the world's first fully cloud-based location over cellular platform. We power 4G and 5G connected devices to have accurate location everywhere, while also enabling the lowest cost possible and the longest battery life. Today's location market is fragmented, requiring multiple solutions to provide indoor and outdoor location. Pulte is your single source for accurate location everywhere. So how do we do it? Unlike hardware-based location capabilities like GPS or Wi-Fi, Pulte is a software-only solution that enables 4G and 5G connected devices to be able to provide accurate location both indoors and out. We have a cloud-based location solution that because we move the computations to the cloud, we offload devices from that heavy compute cycle, allowing battery life to be able to go to 50 times better than competitive solutions. In addition, since we're firmware only on the device, we get rid of all that extra hardware, enabling 80% savings over the competition. We have 74 global patents and patents pending. The core of it is something called super resolution. Super resolution allows us to get rid of the error-inducing multi-path that allows us to be able to get to the best line of sight estimations to the surrounding cell towers that are around all of us today. This is the best solution over cellular, 3 to 10 times better than any other cellular solution, including OTDOA, which is used by today's E911 systems. In addition, since we're in the cloud, we collect information and data from all of the connected devices on our network. This allows us to leverage machine learning and develop heuristics that really take care of the tail, which is the hardest part in location solutions today. And we get better as we scale. Let's take a look at how it works. We partnered with a local logistics company to embed Pulte-enabled trackers in their pallets. This allows them to track their pallets whether they're in their warehouse or on the move. They can even track down pallets if they go missing. In fact, this one by Tyler, one of our engineers, he thought this would make a great coffee table for his new apartment. Let's go to the Security Operations Center dashboard. Let's then track him down. Since we're real time, we're able to trigger when Tyler crosses a geofence and send an alert to the security team. When we press the geofence, we center in on that asset and track them down. If this is Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, we would have completely lost visibility when they got away from the warehouse. And since we're using cellular, we're able to track that asset indoors and out, as you can see, both in the warehouse and on the move in the back of the SUV. In GPS, you wouldn't have been able to do this because you wouldn't be able to have any visibility to satellites. We leveraged the 10 million plus LTE base stations deployed globally to create the best location solution on Earth. We bring GPS down to Earth. We sell our solution in a SaaS business model, in a pay-as-you-go model that allows you to add location to your application as simple as just adding our API to your code. This allows us to be able to be since we're software only, relative to the competition, you have to buy the chip, the GPS chip or the Wi-Fi chip. We're software from day one, allows you to grow as you use. Our partners are all in this because this is a great value proposition, from chipset to the cloud and system integrators. We are working with the following partners to be able to go to market by the end of this year. Sequans and Ryan on the chipset side, Sercom and Nimblink, who are pallet tracking and personal tracker solutions, including this one from Sercom. Just press a button and you can find where you are. And logistics is just the beginning. We're working with medical device companies to be able to locate their devices, personal emergency buttons, manufacturing and IoT, as well as getting the integrity of location for supply chain. And our team is ready to go. We have hundreds of years of experience, including 12 startups and 6 successful exits. And today, we are introducing our system integrator program. We're inviting chipset partners, device manufacturers, and system integrators to come join us to be able to add the best location possible to your solutions. Go to Pulte.com, Battlefield, today. We'd love for you to join us. Thank you.
All right, judges.
Can you talk a little bit about the accuracy and availability trade-offs versus GPS?
Sure. We're able to get down to single-digit meter accuracy for in-building solutions, and then using just the macro cellular network, which doesn't require any small cells or anything like such as inside the Marconi Center, we're able to get to sub-15-meter accuracy.
You mentioned you have a lot of great partners on there. Have you deployed with any customers yet? If so, how many? What's kind of the size of that deployment?
So we're building our product right now. We've gone through 2 proof of concept trials with multiple tier 1 mobile network operators, in addition to working with each of the different vendors, chipsets, device partners, to validate, to make sure that the software that we put on their platforms is ready to go. So by the end of the year, when we've also completed our initial beta platform for the cloud, which has security as well as full redundancy capabilities, and we'll be able to launch by the end of the year.
How big a team do you have now?
We have 16 people, 11 engineers and 5 people who are just business development all day long.
So if I have, so if it's logistics, right, that seems to be the use case. If I've put one of these devices in a container at the factory in China, and then I want to track that all the way to some DC in the US, is there any point where I lose visibility?
Sure. Since we're terrestrial only, leveraging the 4G and 5G signals that are out there, we're only where there's signal for LTE. So going over the ocean, or if you're in the plane. But what we do is we're able to hybridize with other solutions to be able to provide full visibility. And once you get from port to port or into the airport entry points, we got you from there.
So do you hybridize with GPS then?
We can, but we actually really think that we, for the most part, replace GPS for most of the use cases that we're looking at. However, GPS you can't beat in certain areas. Like if you're out in the middle of nowhere where there aren't any other cellular signals. So for those particular use cases, we can hybridize.
So you don't get the hardware savings if you have to rely on GPS as well as your solution.
Correct. One thing that we do is we can make GPS better. So one of the biggest issues with GPS is startup time. And one of the reasons why the battery life goes away so quickly is that you're constantly looking for satellites. So to the extent that we can provide a cellular assist on location, that can actually reduce the time that GPS can actually acquire signals as well. At the end of the day, we believe that from our go-to-market strategy standpoint, we believe we can open up a whole new category of use cases because we can reduce the cost down to the single dollar range for a tracker by getting rid of the GPS.
From a maintenance perspective, what's the time between charges then with this lower power solution?
So depending on the use case, so that pallet tracker is an example, we can go from 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2 years.
Typically, they'll see 4 to 6 fixes a day. They want to know where a particular tracker, a particular pallet may be, or a freight might be during the day, and they're typically sensor triggered, right? So if there's some sort of motion detected, we'll take over from there. So 4 to 6 times a day can get you to a year plus of battery life.
So you fail on the ocean, like roughly what proportion of the US would you have enough 4G, 5G coverage to get coverage?
Yep. So if you see the map commercials, it's 99% of Americans and the public. And so one of the things we realized,
99% of
the population,
which is different than the geographic coverage, right?
Indeed.
So roughly what is it of the actual topography?
I don't know exactly. So at the time when I was running the network for Metro PCS and we added all of our roaming partners, it's roughly about 70% of the overall geography in terms of square mileage. But when you think about the use cases that we're enabling, where you're bringing containers to the edge of population areas because you're delivering them for big box retailers or the like, generally that's where you're going to want to know where things are, right? So when you're in transit on highways, right? So even during the rail, right? So when we built our networks, we also covered the railways because people want to have connectivity. So if you think about the coverage of where the use cases are going to be, we think it's a lot larger than that.
How much does a tracking chip cost, and how does that relate to, for example, how your customers would think of the value of a pallet or the cost of GPS?
Yeah. So we've been working very closely with a number of different chipset partners. And if you look at some of the things that are coming out that are LTE, IoT-based profiles, so there's something called narrowband IoT, Cat-M. These were variants of the standards that allow the chipsets to become almost 10 times cheaper than they've been in the past for your smartphone. So in China, one of the chipset partners that we're talking about, they're talking sub 50-cent chipsets for LTE connectivity.
A lot of us are e-commerce investors. That's why all the questions towards you are about tracking the pallet from China to US and elsewhere.
Understand.
Yeah.
Understand.
All right, one more round of applause for Pulte.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have one more company in this round of the Startup Battlefield. That company is McCarthy. Presenting for McCarthy are Nick Whitehouse and Richard DeFrancisco. Come on out, guys.
Our world is getting more complex. For individuals like you and I, protecting or even understanding our legal rights is hard. This problem is massively multiplied in business. There's an immense pressure on businesses to move faster. But to do so, they need to navigate layers of policy, confusing laws, and changing regulations. With all this confusion, you'd think it'd be a great time to be a lawyer, right? But many see law as slow, expensive, and intimidating. Courtrooms are at capacity. Law firms are writing off work, and in-house legal teams are ignoring risk just to keep up. Manual legal is losing share and relevance to a growing legal tech industry that has oversimplified the problem. glossing over the nuance that is so important to law. McCarthy-Finch is changing how law works. Leading PhDs and a swarm of lawyers have built Author, a highly advanced legal AI platform that is arming the armies of the industry. Think AWS or Azure for law. This platform combines 18+ custom, pre-trained learning models that can be configured and integrated into any legal process. These algorithms allow lawyers to virtualize their expertise and automate all manner of legal services. Let's see one example of this now. Move to the demo. Rich has got a time-critical project, and it's stuck. He's finally been sent a contract by his supplier. It's a large and complex document. Sending this to his legal team will take weeks to get back. Sending it externally will cost thousands, if not the same amount of time. Instead, he's going to use Author to do an initial QA and redline of this contract. Author intelligently reads contracts, creating structure from unstructured language, classifying the contract type, identifying labeling clauses and details. Author uses its higher-level inference engine to assess this for issues and risks. In this example, Author has found a problem with this contract. If it didn't, it would automatically approve it. In the document, you can see what Author is looking for and the issues it's found. It's important to note, Author is telling you why something is wrong and giving you alternative solutions.
Could you zoom in just to explain what's going on here?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So on the right-hand side, you can see that there are clauses, details, and issues. These clauses are the different things that Author is looking for. The details are the different details that Author is looking for, such as termination periods and details like that. Clauses are the different clauses. The issues that Author has found here, there are 3 issues that it's found. The first is there's no term clause in this contract. So Author is suggesting 2 term clauses to be inserted that it believes are appropriate, a 24-month and a 36-month term clause. So if Richard inserts that, you'll see that it will drop into the document. The next issue it's found is that the termination notice duration for this contract is too long. So 90 days breaks the corporate policy that we've set with Rich. Author is suggesting 60 or 30 days. And the last thing that Author has noticed here is it's read the liability clause, and it's determined that this liability clause is too unfavorable. So that's legal reasoning. And it's rewritten this clause in both a favorable and a neutral wording. And so if we just go ahead with neutral wording and insert that there, what you'll see is the contract is then approved. And we can now download this and send it back to the supplier with the markups. So look, Rich has taken a weeks-long process and completed it in a matter of minutes. If we can move back to the slides. Built on tens of millions of data points, legal data points, and tens of thousands of hours of legal expertise, Author can read, write, and reason like a lawyer. The Author platform has mastered nuance. Unlike traditional AI techniques, our patent-pending technology understands tiny details in language that make all the difference in law. Author's human comparable learning allows us to learn from incredibly small data sets as you work. And most importantly, Author's outputs are entirely explainable. No black box, making results defensible and trustworthy. Competitors offer point solutions that tackle part of the problem, such as contract analytics, due diligence, and document discovery. But their AI fails to enhance the knowledge base of any specific business, creating generic results for all. In contrast, Author enables your intelligence to be shared across the entire organization, giving you agency over your data, your training effort, and your competitive expertise. Author's been used to reduce legal effort drafting by up to 70%, completely automate court decision classifications, help resolve legal queries by up to 60%, and gather legal market insight up to 99% faster. Legal tech is a $30 billion industry, yet we serve right across legal, risk, and compliance. Combined, this is a $1 trillion market. And we've partnered with Accenture and digital integrators such as Deloitte to rapidly transform this space. Our pricing model has 3 components: a platform access fee, volume-based API charges, and an optional app fee. If you're a legal service provider, lawyer, or in-house legal team, and you're looking to improve profitability and build velocity, go to disrupt.mccarthyfinch.com. Start building the future of law. Thanks.
Okay, judges.
So when you say the liability clause in this contract is too long, you're making a judgment about a deviation from a standard. Where does that standard come from?
So
do
that
you feed
not-
me documents? Do I configure a set of policies? What
No,
happens?
so that's not a standard. That is, we're actually reading the language. We're determining the parties, who's involved in that, understanding the context of that, and we make a judgment on that. And that threshold can be curated by the legal team in terms of where that...
Right, so that's a policy that you as a legal team have set. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking. So how many of these types of judgments, or I would think of them as configuration?
Yeah,
right?
so out of the box, there'll be there's a number of things that are just there. What we've found in the legal space is that every lawyer has a different tolerance level, and so we allow that to be configured. But a number of those things are out of the box.
Are we talking tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of configurations? What are we talking?
No, we're talking about, for an individual document like that, it's 10.
No, but this is something that is going to be extensible across a lot of different document types, right? That's the whole point. So
Yeah, absolutely. So there's both implicit and explicit kind of inference, right? So an implicit inference is based on a data set based on things that we identify. And so that takes care of the large amounts of configuration that you want to do. And then there'll be 10, 15 things that you might want to configure for a specific agreement in that example.
Is there a subset of industries or types of contract that you're starting to train your model on to get this level of flexibility?
Yeah, so I guess we're not just focused on contracts. So as a platform, we're reading, we're writing, we're problem solving, we're thinking like a lawyer. So what we've seen, that covers both insight generation and capture. That covers contracts. We call that review, so being able to review. Approval fits into review, drafting, and also triage, which is conversational AI. And so where we've found that is predominantly in-house teams in the corporate space, legal teams in the corporate space are really interested in this stuff, as well as consumer-based legal tech firms and also large system integrators.
how many engineers and data scientists have you working on this?
So we have 19 people in total across New Zealand and America, and predominantly with PhDs, 4 PhDs, legal engineers, and developers.
So that's 19 adds up.
Yeah, and then us two fit into that.
So 19 total employees,
Yes,
or 19?
yeah, 19 total, 17 the developers.
So I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with putting lawyers out of work. It's a good thing. But a lot of this data is confidential, very sensitive. So is this a cloud service on-prem? And how do you get, and this gets to the points raised earlier, how do you gather the data so the integration post-sale shortens over time and doesn't combinatorially explode?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, and data is one of the problems that we had going into this. We saw that deep learning approaches were going to always cause a problem in law for a number of reasons: explainability, the ability to get to nuance, and the ability for people to be able to train on bespoke cases. A lot of law firms, in-house teams don't have 30,000, 10,000, 5,000 examples to learn something. And so what we've actually built is human comparable learning, which is very much about incredibly small data set to learn. So in some cases, our models learn from 2 to 4 examples, and then they go into ensemble approaches where we can bring in data that transacts through there to boost that over time. And so by removing the need for a huge amount of data, we can actually start providing value quite quickly without this challenge of privacy and the collection of a bunch of data. We also have a number of different tools around de-identification of data as well, so that you can start putting data in that removes identifying features.
So if you're doing learning off of such small data sets, then how do you prevent overfit?
So that's literally, that is tuning, and that is the hardest thing that we deal with. So
It's human.
Yeah.
It's human oversight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we have a team of legal engineers. So everything we do when
So
we
is a legal engineer an engineer or a lawyer?
It's both. So it's a lawyer who's actually an engineer.
So how are
So someone that has a law degree and a degree in
has
computer
been
science.
has been working in tech. Yeah.
A legal engineer is a lawyer who's worked in tech.
Yes. So understands the technology, understands what our PhDs are talking about, talks the language, can read the code.
So there's 10 of those in the world.
And we've got
You've got
a
a few
handful
of them
of it. Yeah. Yeah.
One in the audience.
Have you rolled out your services, and what are the initial type of contracts that you're focusing on right now?
So I guess some of the use cases we have, so they aren't just contracts. Some of them have been around extraction classification across large industries. We've done things around financial advice and monitoring the financial advice that's been given out from policy and documents like that. We're working with government and legislative spaces, and we're also working in, as you said, in-house where we're seeing things like sales contracts, so sales and purchase.
And how do you charge them? Such a variety of services.
Yeah,
How
so
do you
what we've
charge?
tried to do with our charging program is to try to make it as easy to acquire as possible, and try to make it as standard. So we have a platform charge, and then we have an API charge, which is basically based on volume.
All right, give it up for McCarthy Finch. That is the end of the first session of the Startup Battlefield. All of our judges are going to follow me now. Backstage, they're going to deliberate, help us choose our finalists. But before they do, let's give them one final round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage TechCrunch editor and Disrupt MC, Jordan Crook.
What's up? How we doing? Enthusiastic as ever. Love it. I love it, I love it. I missed you guys. And I can sense that you missed me too, so thank you. Lighten up. Is everyone okay? Jesus. All right. A few years ago, actually more than that, this idea of cryptocurrency came onto the scene, and I just buried my head in the sand hoping that it would go away so I wouldn't have to learn about it. Other folks really leaned in. One of those is the founder of TechCrunch, Michael Arrington, and we are going to bring him up onto the stage. He is also the founder of Arrington XRP Capital, as well as Brad Garlinghouse with Ripple. So please welcome them to the stage, as well as your moderator, Mike Butcher. Big round of applause.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
You have
Well,
TechCrunch branded water now?
We have TechCrunch branded water,
Come
yes.
a long way since your years.
Yes, quite a lot has changed.
Shit has changed since I was here.
There's even coffee backstage. It's incredible. We're going to sort of set up the conversation a little bit. You know, when Satoshi Nakamoto invented Bitcoin during the last recession, he, she, or they, who knows who they were, imagined a completely decentralized world with the Bitcoin blockchain, but it required constant mining, obviously, to unearth its cryptocurrency. Now, Ripple, represented here by CEO Brad, is a real-time gross settlement system, currency exchange, and remittance network created by Ripple Labs, which is a fintech company. Now, it's built on a consensus ledger and the cryptocurrency known as XRP. So, hello. Now, when Ripple decided to pre-mine its XRP currency, it pre-mined it, okay? So it's already all mined. And then it instituted a handful of centralized nodes to create a highly scalable network. Fintech really needs scalability. However, here's what happened. All hell broke loose because crypto libertarians who believe in decentralization effectively thought this is a ridiculous idea. Then along comes Mr. Arrington, fresh from having leaving venture capital fund Crunch Fund, launched his own crypto fund, Arrington XRP, so named because the fund was built on XRP using Ripple, using XRP, and using Ripple to transfer money globally at speed between LPs, companies funding etc. But the crypto libertarians to this day rail against Ripple and XRP and anyone who will deal with them, including Arrington XRP. So, Brad, some of these crypto libertarians, some of them have actually literally called you the devil. Are you?
Lucifer.
Lucifer.
No, I'm not the devil.
Can you prove it?
Look, I think it's an interesting place to start, in part because I think there are a lot of religious zealots in the crypto space. And I think people believe things in a way that you would kind of describe as religious zealotry. You know, Ripple took a contrarian view pretty early in our evolution and said, look, if you want to really revolutionize the way payments work, if you really want to revolutionize the way transactions work in this regard, it's not going to happen by everybody giving up their existing infrastructure and just switching to something new. As much as I am actually a bull on Bitcoin, the Bitcoin blockchain is not, there's not going to be one ledger to rule them all. Ripple invented a series of technologies built upon the XRP ledger that allows institutions, banks, and even in some cases governments to take advantage of these technologies and dramatically accelerate the nature of transactions.
He's fully into talking points now.
Look, I'm trying to explain. The thing I'm getting to is simply the idea that the people who say that Ripple is somehow, your word, the devil, it's because we're partnering with the man. We decided if you want to enable an internet of value, you've got to connect the repositories of value. And the repositories of value are the banks.
Why couldn't the banks have went for a more fully centralized network, though?
Well, to some degree, that's what they use today. I mean, cross-border payments today, which are slow and expensive.
Fully decentralized, I meant to say.
Well, the XRP ledger is fully decentralized. Ripple, the company, cannot control the XRP ledger.
Apart from the fact that you control a handful of nodes.
We control a handful of nodes. But I mean, we control, I think, something around 7% of all of the public nodes on the XRP ledger. So, I mean, in contrast, you have miners in China that control, north of, 3 miners control north of 50% of the Bitcoin blockchain. By any measure, the Bitcoin blockchain is more centralized than the XRP ledger.
Why did you pick XRP as for your fund?
Well, first of all, could I ask something?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just used to being...
I was worried there were going to be 2 interviewers in one.
Well, no, you could roll back transactions, right, on your ledger? Because you control all the nodes, so...
This is one of the FUD kind of misinformation things that people say. Like, Ripple can block a transaction. Not true. Can we roll back a transaction? Not true.
You could. You just would never do that, right?
We actually can't.
Oh, I thought you could.
No.
Oh, I was hoping you could. All right. So I chose...
So is that going to affect your...
I was under the impression that we could... No. So there's 2 answers, both partially true. as to why I went with XRP. The first answer that's partially true is when I decided to do a crypto fund, which was last year, after I made a couple of investments on my own and through Crunch Fund, I naturally went to Brad because we've become very good friends. Not everybody knows this, but TechCrunch was originally sold to AOL and eventually became part of the Verizon behemoth because of Brad. Because he was at AOL, it wouldn't have happened without him. He was the primary person that made that deal happen. Naturally, I'm his friend because he made me wealthy. Not as wealthy as him, but wealthy. And so, and I also like him as a human being. So I went to him
in that
because
order.
he was, yes, in that order. So when I went to him, he was the CEO of Ripple. And so I would talk to him about the fund. And true story, when Brad first joined Ripple, I told him it was the dumbest career move he'd ever made in a long string of bad career moves. And it turns out now he's the 5th richest person in California or something. But I went to him for advice, and he helped. He helped me raise the fund. Although Ripple isn't an LP, he helped me by introducing me to most of our large LPs that hold large amounts of XRP. The other answer, which is also true, is XRP is a fantastic currency to use for, among other things, hedge funds. We need to move a lot of money very quickly. We make investments all over the world. Our LPs come from all over the world. And using banks to move money is a pain in the ass. I mean, it takes a day or two to move money around the world. And with XRP, our very first close was 50 million. We moved that money in, and I'm not shitting you, in like 3 seconds. And I think it cost 20 or 30 cents. You really need to think about that.
But that's...
And so it's fantastic to use it for that.
You're moving it using the Ripple protocol, but the problem is that
he used the XRP ledger to do that.
He's using it. You're using the XRP ledger, but there's an issue here.
I didn't do anything. Somebody else did it. But I just know that the money moved in like that, like literally like that, and it cost nothing. And have you ever sent money in an international wire? I mean, it's a pain in the ass. And then you got to call, and did you get it? And what? No, I didn't get. And it's truly revolutionary.
Well, I mean, you can use, there's lots of startups, TransferWise, et cetera, that will do that kind of thing. But obviously there are charges, and obviously larger amounts of...
You can't PayPal
Can I interject
$50 million.
I think TransferWise is a fabulous company, and they've done some very clever things by hacking the existing system. What TransferWise does is optimize the existing infrastructure and, in effect, hack the system so that you have a better outcome. What Ripple is trying to do is say, look, can we reset the rail? TransferWise loves what we're doing because if we're successful, it makes their job actually easier. There's a lot of companies that spend a lot of time and energy, and TransferWise and Currency Cloud are examples, that are taking the existing system and saying, how can I put accounts all over the place, and I'm going to have my own, effectively, ledger within TransferWise to debit and credit so I can make funds available more quickly than otherwise would be the case.
But one of the issues, let's be honest, is that you've come up with a fantastic ability to move money around the planet, but there's also this issue of XRP, the currency, which prices are crashing all over the place. You're trying to get banks to use the actual currency. That some of them are using the Ripple protocol, but they're not using XRP, are they? So how do you address that? In a way, you pre-mined all this currency, made a heck of a lot of money. Let's talk about that. But then now you're trying to get people to use XRP. You're getting Madonna to talk about XRP. You're talking or Ripple, getting Ashton Kutcher to talk about it. I mean, these aren't necessarily the people who staid bankers normally listen to.
Did you have to pay Madonna? I don't know about that.
So a whole bunch of things got conflated in there. So
How do you get
let's
Madonna?
parse that apart. First of all, I actually
Can we
would
please
even
talk about the Madonna?
argue...
Just for 1 second. How does that happen? Is it like, the agent, you guys shared a private jet? Like, how do you get
I was
Madonna
trying to answer the question about what's happening with crypto crashes.
Yeah,
Madonna,
Ellen DeGeneres.
Ripple has been very proactive as a company, both its leadership team as well as the company, in being philanthropic. We have supported, we gave $29 million to Donors Choose, which funded by the way, if you don't know Donors Choose, it is one of the most incredible organizations I've ever seen.
But that's because you had all this crypto left over when you mined it.
Like, I think as a general statement, Silicon Valley doesn't do enough to give back.
Google didn't fund Donors Choose. Lots of companies in Silicon Valley have a lot of money. I mean, that was a true act of generosity.
I've never been, we may be accused of being the devil in terms of how we have partnered with the system. I've never been accused of being the devil for being philanthropic and supporting causes that are actually good for the planet.
Fair comment.
To speak to that,
But what about answering the question about...
I was trying to answer the question. You want to talk about Madonna? You were talking about the crypto crash. First of all, let's level set. 18 months ago, the entire crypto market was worth $20 billion. Today, it's worth $230 billion. Now, granted, in between, it hit about 850 billion, so it's crashed from 850. By any normal measure, if we drew a straight line from 18 months ago to today, you'd say it's been a huge bull market. I also point out, like, there have been, over the last 5 or 6 years, multiple, quote, crashes that have been effectively reconsolidation, and we've seen as utility and problems are solved with these technologies, you're going to see a separation, I think, between those that are purely speculative and those that are actually solving real utility, solving real problems in the marketplace.
Which one are you?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about your own experience of using XRP and using Ripple's technologies to solve real problems.
Which ones are the ones that are a joke in the top 10?
I'm not going there.
Why?
Look, the other thing you talked about...
Yeah, what about EOS?
Why?
What about EOS?
Let's talk about EOS.
Neo?
I will say right now, EOS is a huge pile of shit. Do you
know what?
agree?
I will say, one of the projects
You think EOS is a huge pile of shit?
I think that these projects that come out and raise a lot of money, in some cases billions of dollars, are they don't need that much money. And so I always think it's odd. And I think that if you look back at the history of Silicon Valley, there are, as far as I know, 0 examples of companies that have raised massive amounts of funding before they launch a product and being successful. If there's examples, I can't think of them.
Did Ripple donate? Is Ripple an LP in your fund in Arrington XRP?
No.
Did they give you XRP to help start the fund?
Well, no. I mean, you're saying like they're not an investor. Do they just give me a bunch of free XRP? It's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
I think it's like a marketing expense. It'd be like
No,
how much did Madonna get?
How did much? Yeah, right. So that is marketing.
You
but
are
then
not Madonna.
You're one of the biggest voices in investing.
We're not a charity.
That's just being. Is Madonna? Can I just say?
We didn't give money to Madonna. We gave money to a philanthropic effort around, that Madonna was a champion.
There you go. Okay.
And Ashton Kutcher.
No,
didn't he? Wasn't he?
He was the delivery. I mean, he and Madonna are friends, and so he has been active in that. But no,
Okay.
I mean,
What is it? By the way, what is it with these XRP fanboys on Twitter? You've got you've got a follower called XRP Trump on Twitter. You've got
I like that guy.
a woman called Tiffany Hayden who basically just goes XRP is amazing all the time.
She's fantastic.
What's going on? Are you paying them to shill?
No,
XRP?
That's a little rude. That's a little rude to accuse him of paying.
Well, it's just a question.
it's a fair question. We do not pay. I mean,
It might be a marketing expense.
We have a lot of advocates.
You don't pay them, do you?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he does. See.
Why do you think are they just trying to boost the currency?
I think most of what they're doing is correcting the record. They're going out and saying, look, somebody says something, frankly, similar to what you said, which is the XRP ledger is centralized.
Yeah.
It's factually not true.
Okay, let me say something. So this goes to, is he the devil as well? So
Sure.
you
need to come back to that. Yeah.
I mean, look, one of the most interesting books I've ever read is Guns, Germs, and Steel. And I'm sure many of people in this room have read it. And we naturally are tribal, and we form teams. And when you add steroids to that in the form of money, you've got a situation where you have what from the outside looks crazy of everybody forming up in these teams. And I have been sort of de facto named to the XRP team, even though we hold a very small amount of XRP today because our LPs actually want us to diversify. But I'm just sort of I'm sort of named part of that team. And you've got the fanboys for everybody, and they're all the same. I mean, they really are. The fanboys for Bitcoin and the fanboys for XRP are literally the same. I mean, and they're saying almost the same things. And it's just sort of creepy and weird. But some of these people, and some of the ones you named, aren't creepy and weird. They're actually like enthusiasts who've changed their lives and the lives of their family. Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned Tiffany. She's like a single mom who has helped raise her children because of her investments in cryptocurrency. That's not a joke. I mean, that's a real thing.
Yeah, fair comment. That's fair comment. What about, I mean, one of your views also, your criticisms of Ethereum is that, I mean, it's got a big developer network, and you're trying to boost the amount of developers using XRP with Xspring, this project called Spring or Xspring. It's spelled with an X, but it's called Spring, which you're trying to get developers onto it. It's a bit like Microsoft trying to get developers to develop apps in a way, isn't it? You're trying to boost the market. Do you think?
Well, I mean, look, I think there's lots of people that invest in developer ecosystems.
Yeah.
You know, the observation I'd make about the Ethereum ecosystem today is there's a lot of experimentation.
Yeah.
There is not a lot of successful deployed, we're solving a real problem.
What's your view about Ethereum? What's your general view?
There's a lot of interesting experiments going on.
Do
And
you own
I'll be
any
interested.
Ether?
I don't own any Ether.
But you do Bitcoin.
I do. So look, I think one of the mistakes, and Mike likes to make fun of me for lots of things, but one of the things he was talking about backstage is years ago I wrote this thing called the Peanut Butter Manifesto. It was a long time ago, and the thesis was that Yahoo, where I worked at the time, was spreading itself too thin. It was trying to do too many things, serving too many masters, as opposed to really specializing and being the best in the world at something. And I think in many ways what's going on in the crypto land is similar. Ripple has very specifically decided to go very deep in a particular vertical with a clear customer, a clear value proposition, and solving a clear problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these things. I mean, look, you read these things. I was meeting with some of the IBM team, and they were talking about using a blockchain to track flower freshness. I don't get it.
Yeah.
First of all, I think a database.
I might be an investor.
More often than not, a database is going to be more efficient than a blockchain, and people use words like blockchain and crypto as catnip for the investors that were up here before us.
That's true.
There's, do you feel that Ripple will try and replace SWIFT in the banking system? Is that?
I hope it does.
Well, look,
something has to improve upon SWIFT. SWIFT it's like we never even got email, right? I mean, it's like we're still using snail mail for everything, and something has to give in that.
I mean, we're going to have the SEC, by the way, at some point. I mean, what would happen, do you think, if the SEC decided to declare XRP a security?
Well, look, first to answer that, we got to make sure we understand what is a security, right? A security is something that represents ownership in a company. It gives you rights to dividends, give you rights to governance, things like that. XRP and Ripple are two separate things. We have shareholders in Ripple, the company. We have investors that include Google Ventures. We have banks that have invested. They own shares of Ripple, the company. When you buy XRP, that doesn't give you any rights to the profits or ownership of Ripple, the company. The other thing that's important to understand
so
is...
do you think that's going to, that'll... that's an air gap between you and the SEC?
There's multiple air gaps. The amount of misinformation on this one, I think, is also profound. If Ripple, the company, I mean, we have joked, we had an all-hands about a couple months ago, and some people didn't think it was very funny, but we pointed out that if Ripple, the company, shut down tomorrow, the XRP ledger would continue to operate. So if XRP is a security, it's a security of what? Now, one of the other things that people talk about is information asymmetry, that if a company has information that could influence the price, then maybe that is more like a security. And the irony there is one of the major drivers of inflection of the price of XRP is Coinbase. The rumors about is Coinbase going to list XRP or not? So does that mean XRP is a security of Coinbase or of Ripple? So look, I think the facts are pretty clear that XRP is not a security, and I think that as time goes by, that'll become clearer. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that.
You seem pretty relaxed about it.
I actually am pretty relaxed about it, because I think the facts are on our side.
Mike, you've been doing a ton of traveling as an investor.
Yeah.
Now you've famously said that you're devoting the next 10 years or so to crypto and blockchain instead of the old traditional VC model from Crunch Fund. Israel, Singapore, Europe. Do you think the SEC is eventually going to start to regulate this, or
I don't know.
What's your view about how the position they're taking? Have they talked to you, perhaps?
Oh, fucking SEC. So first of all, I got a letter. I invested in a company as a private person last year, not as a fund, and they sent me a subpoena, and it was like literally accusing me of crimes because the CEO of the company had once spoken at a TechCrunch conference years after I left TechCrunch, and like it was some quid pro quo, and like it was like they're actually making like criminal, and my lawyer had to deal with it. I ended up spending about $30,000 getting him to fuck off. And like, so first of all, I'm a libertarian. I don't like the government in general, but the SEC, forgetting my personal issues with them because it was just money, I'm actually like irate because the SEC is single-handedly fucking this industry in the U.S. And so we have a few good U.S. investments. Proppy's one, I'm wearing their T-shirt. Another one is Reserve, a company in Oakland, and a couple of others. But 80 to 90% of our investments are in Asia, Europe, and Israel right now, because there are actually countries where there's enough regulatory certainty that that entrepreneurs feel safe starting token companies there, blockchain companies there. Here they don't. There's so much regulatory uncertainty, and then add to that the tax burden and the visa burdens of coming here, and then our current federal government's stance on immigration in general. They're just saying, fuck it, and they're staying in Singapore or Israel or Europe instead of coming here and starting companies. It is the SEC needs to get their act together, because if they had done that with the internet in 94, 95, TechCrunch and this, none of us would be here. We'd all be living in Shanghai or somewhere else, wherever managed to get their act together. So when the SEC person comes on stage, first of all, I'd kick them out of the conference. But if they actually come up on stage, I'd ask them, like, do you realize you're single-handedly, like, wrecking the next stage of technology development, and how do you feel about that? And, see what she says. So, yeah.
Well,
so I have somewhat.
We'll ask, but I think Mike feels strongly about that one.
I really feel like fairly strongly about that.
Look, I will. Mike and I agree on some of that. We actually disagree on some of it, and he and I have talked about this.
Well, you're a Trump supporter, right? So that's probably the big.
Listen, in California, you can get shot for saying things like.
Would you like to confirm or deny?
Look, the thing I would say.
You look like a Republican, right? You just look. Actually, I know you don't like Trump. Yeah.
I can neither confirm nor deny. Look, on the topic of the SEC, the one thing I will say is there are unequivocally bad actors in the ICO ecosystem. There have been frauds. There have been massive scams. Hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars have been heisted. And if anything, I'm surprised the SEC hasn't been more aggressive going after some of those bad actors.
Like who?
Now, that doesn't take away from Mike's point.
What is the hesitation of naming them?
The clarity would be very helpful, and I agree with him that there is a risk that a lot of this development ends up non-U.S. And the impact on the United States economy for having the internet that we think of today being very U.S.-centric in many ways has been very, very positive to the United States. I'll talk positively about some. There's a project that I find very interesting called Augur. I'm very interested in what's going to happen there. I'm intrigued.
Do you like Trump because he's about tearing up all the regulation?
Look, Ripple as a company wants to work with regulators around the world.
Yes or no?
No, it's when he's going to talking points. He's like, no, not going to answer that question.
My public donations to political figures is documented on the internet.
Fair comment. Well, unfortunately, I don't have access, so we'll have to check.
Somebody can Google it.
Michael, finally, you famously moved from Crunch. You founded TechCrunch. Heavens above. Thank you, by the way. Thank you for hiring me.
And you are the oldest.
I am about 3,000 years old. Yes.
I didn't mean how old you are. You actually have been here longer than any. You're actually one of only a couple of people who were here when I was here.
A couple of people left of us. Yes, still going.
Yeah.
Completely.
You drove the rest.
We love it.
It's good that there's still a couple people here.
We love what we do.
Because now there's so many of you.
There's a lot of us.
And I don't even know, like.
There's a question in here somewhere.
You left TechCrunch. You founded Crunch Fund famously. I remember the Unplayed Blogger T-shirts, and you founded Crunch Fund. And last year you founded Arrington XRP. Really, all boots into crypto. But I mean, how's that relationship with Crunch Fund now? Did you leave on good terms? Any bad blood?
Oh, yeah, no, everything's fine. I just think that I wanted to do crypto. My partner didn't as much, and I believed in this, obviously. It wasn't just that I believe in crypto. It's also I'm a little tired of the VC game. It's very different. It's all new players in crypto. It's younger, fresher, more interesting, people from all over the world. The VC game has gotten very, very tiring to me. Also, and I could go into that, but I won't. But also, crypto moves much more quickly. Those of you in the audience, who in here considers themselves a crypto person? So you, actually more than I thought, like the crypto world moves like significantly faster than the normal tech world, which already moves quickly. But a few months feels like a year or two in crypto. And I actually like that. I think it's keeping me young, it's keeping me excited, and it's just a lot more fun. So, yeah.
So, Brad, finally, are you actually the richest person in California now?
I have no idea even how to start answering that question.
It's a very rude question.
I apologize. Well, I shall leave it there then.
I think Larry Ellison, I think he must win that. I think Larry or Sergey or the two Larrys, Larry Page.
They're probably the ones.
Yeah. I have no idea. Yeah.
Guys, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, we back. Just friendly reminder. Actually, like the guys from Otter AI were like, "Thank you so much for mentioning us." So I'm just going to keep doing that to get the gas. So Otter.ai. Use the code TechCrunch for transcripts. Mostly useful for the media, but I'm sure that the rest of you can find something to use those for as well. And with that, we are going to go on to our investment panel. Again, just quick show of hands. How many of you are founders? Cool. You're going to enjoy this one. Trust me. So with that, we're going to put our hands together for Aileen Lee from Cowboy Ventures, Megan Quinn from Spark Capital, and Sarah Tovel from Benchmark Capital, along with our moderator, Connie Loizos.
Hi, guys. This VC discussion is always one of my favorites at these Disrupt events because the industry is always changing. I think a couple of years we were sort of talking about the speed with which VC funds were raising new funds, which was sort of alarming to their investors. Last year we talked a little bit about Uber and whether the ethics of founders had changed compared with their predecessors. This year there are sort of new interesting developments, mega rounds, SoftBank, even more broadly, whether Silicon Valley, which has sort of long been the center of the startup universe, is maybe losing its gravitational pull. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Thank you so much. I thought we could talk maybe first about the last, which is whether Silicon Valley is on the wane. There's this much discussed article that came out last week in The Economist posing this question. Aileen, do you have any thoughts about it? Did you read the story?
I did not read the story, but it's common probably for all of us around boardrooms to be talking about the hiring challenges in the Bay Area. And when companies get to a certain size, it often comes up that they're thinking about moving or opening up a second office because it's too expensive to live here. And I know that there's a lot of people trying to work on that problem in the Bay Area, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be successful because it's an amazing place to live, and we've made it really challenging to be able to live here and not be super worried about being able to pay and make ends meet. So we have one portfolio company that was in the Bay Area, and they decided purposefully to move to Colorado because when they thought about building out their team and being able to recruit talent, they decided it was going to be easier to do in Colorado. So we're definitely starting to see that more.
Are you seeing sort of teams headquartered here, maybe sort of like the architects of innovation are in the Bay Area and they're outsourcing the rest of the staff? Or are you seeing sort of teams based elsewhere?
We are seeing innovation everywhere. So a couple of examples, we're investors in a company called Pendo. It's a product experience platform. It's based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I don't think my other portfolio companies will mind me saying this. Of our, let's call it 28 growth stage portfolio companies, Pendo has the easiest time recruiting.
Is that right?
Not just local talent in the research triangle, but actually pulling really great talent from San Francisco, Chicago, New York. We have another investment in a company called Envision. It is a platform for designers, and it is fully distributed. So 700 plus people, 42 plus countries. And no headquarters.
Yep, Abstract, which is in the design space, also is distributed for the same reason.
Automatic.
And for the reasons that Aileen was mentioning before, when we make a growth stage investment in a Bay Area company, these days we often say, post-investment, go to sfo.com, draw a 3-hour circle around San Francisco where they have direct flights, find a city that has a university, and open up a second office as quickly as possible.
I mean, I used to believe very strongly that you had to have your if you wanted to build a multi-billion-dollar company, you had to be based here. Like you could build a company that is up to a couple $100 million in market cap basically everywhere, but the rare companies that actually get to that escape velocity, I have just for a long, long time believed that that you had to be here. And I would always tell people when they would say like, oh, I'm in Austin or New York or wherever it is, it's so much easier for me to recruit. I always had this, well, that's a local maxima, and you want to find the global maximum of talent, and so you have to be here. And it's, for me, also in the last couple of years, I've stopped giving that soap speech because it is just amazing how competitive it is for talent here and how expensive it's become for talent, especially when you're competing against, the big incumbents like Facebook and everybody else that have these gushing cash wells in their businesses, and so they can afford to pay people way more than you would otherwise hope to pay if you're a startup. That said, I do still believe that if you want to go through escape velocity, if you are in hypergrowth, you want to have people who have been there before. I mean, when I was an operator at Pinterest and saw the ability to recruit people from Facebook and Google who have been there before, it just helped us so much. And so it is this like give and take right now that we haven't fully seen shake out.
Well, that's very interesting. So one sort of wrinkle on the article was talking about these big companies, Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, and the fact that they pay people so much and it's hard to compete with them. These sort of startups are toiling in their shadow. But I'm a little bit interested in knowing whether you think it's sort of the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning with these companies. When you look down the road, do you see like fewer and fewer companies that are getting absorbed by these mega companies, which in many cases talk with startups but end up developing their own technologies in-house? Or do you think that sort of, as has happened historically, invariably people will spin out of the companies, out of Airbnb and Uber and rise to sort of compete with them?
Well, we have to be optimists on the latter,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like, it's,
yeah, you wouldn't do this job if you weren't an optimist.
Exactly. And so, you see the talent coming out of these companies, and they're extraordinary. And so, I believe that they will continue to innovate and find opportunities. But to the first part of your question, I think we have a situation right now where, for multiple reasons that we can get into, the companies that have been the acquirers in the past and have created the liquidity that funds our businesses, that keeps kind of this virtuous cycle happening in the Valley, they've been far less acquisitive. And that has created its own ramifications where you see companies staying private longer, you see these big secondary markets happening. You see a lot of just the excess of private capital that is happening, and no exits. So that will be the big thing that we're
and also very few acqui-hires. Like whereas maybe 5 or 10 years ago, companies was raise a seed and get lucky and get bought by Dropbox or Twitter or a private company for $50 or $100 million, which could be a great outcome for the seed investors if they got in at a good valuation, and a great outcome for the employees. But those don't really happen anymore either. And then I think that also changes the dynamic around, and it's important for founders and employees to understand that when they join a company. Like that outcome is much less likely than it was before. And so you have to be joining a team knowing that, and when you raise venture funding, that you have to build something that's really going to scale. Otherwise, the likelihood of getting liquidity or an outcome is much less than it used to be.
And maybe that is why we're seeing some of the mega rounds that we're seeing. But before we get into that, I am wondering, so as an early stage investor, you are confronted with this issue where it used to be easier to see a team get absorbed and you have your nice 3x exit in a short period of time. Are you very reliant now on the secondary market for exits?
Right.
If I can ask.
We're not. We're although maybe we should be if you guys want to throw a little money our way. No, we're just trying to help. We kind of do it the old-fashioned way, where we're trying to help people build companies that are going to be sustainable and durable and competitive in terms of building. I mean, I think things have changed a lot in the past 10 years. Like, we talk a lot about culture and being able to recruit different kinds of people to create more resilience in the company. We talk about how we used to try and convince companies to move from other places to the Bay Area. We'd be like, we don't think you have to move to the Bay Area, though you're not going to be we'd never do that anymore.
Yep.
But no, I mean, I think because companies are staying private longer, it is very helpful that there's a secondary market because people need to be able to pay their bills. And so giving founders and employees some liquidity so that they want to stay and keep growing the company, I think can be a helpful thing. But it's not how we get out.
Is there a point at which that's acceptable? So there was a case fairly recently reported that Travis VanderZand and the CEO of Bird, which is the very popular e-scooter company, had raised, I think, a few $100 million, maybe back in January, February, and had taken money off the table. Now, Bird is just now, I think, approaching its sort of official one-year mark. So on the one hand, that seems very soon.
Yes.
I guess on the other, I think the argument was, well, he was giving opportunities to investors that he couldn't have let into the round otherwise. I don't know. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on it. Megan, do you?
Yeah, this is where some context really matters. So I'm going to pull back a little bit. There's just been tremendous growth on the late stage investing side from a capital perspective. Every venture fund, with the exception of the two next to me, have raised growth funds and have growth practices and growth investors. There's obviously SoftBank. There are more non-traditional investors, whether it's strategics or sovereign wealth funds, than ever before. So there's just a tremendous amount of capital available and dry powder on the late stage side. And quite frankly, there's never been a better time in the history of mankind to raise late stage private capital. So as a result, we're all looking around about how can we invest and allocate this money, which is our job. And there's a menu of things we can do. So we can go earlier into a company's life cycle, which we do a little bit, and we start encroaching maybe a bit on some venture stage opportunities, take a bit more risk. We could go later. We could change our hurdle rate of 3 to 5x, but that's not what we've told our LPs we're going to do. We could expand our aperture geographically, as we've talked about, which we're definitely doing. Or we can double down on the winners. And so basically every growth stage investor has this same menu of option, and you're seeing a lot of the doubling down on the winners. In the first 6 months of this year alone, there was nearly $100 million rounds. And someone, as I mentioned to you backstage beforehand, referred to me today as a PIPO, so a private IPO. And the reason that they're calling them that is because secondary tends to be a part of these large rounds. Yes, both for the founders and employees to give them some liquidity, to take some of their risk off the table, but also to free up some space on the cap table and to return some capital to the early stage investors. And given how much capital there is available at the late stage, I think that's only going to continue. We don't see any pullback on the late stage in terms of the amount of capital there. And in fact, I think, frankly, if you're a growth stage-ish entrepreneur and you're not even considering one of these types of rounds, you are at risk of, bringing a nail file to a bazooka fight.
I mean, I do wonder if all this late-stage funding is going to kill venture capital, though. I mean, there's so much money is looking for these deals, and they're going in earlier and earlier. Your portfolio company, Brandless, recently raised a big round from SoftBank.
Yep.
How did you feel about that? It's 3 years old?
Yeah, no, less, much less.
Oh, okay.
It's a very young company. It's a huge opportunity and a huge vision at Brandless, and I think one of the advantages of SoftBank is they're thinking really big, whereas there is a lot of growth money, and some of the growth investors are strategic thinkers like Megan, but a lot of them come at it more like an actuary would, right? Where it's all about the numbers and what have you done for me lately in terms of it's like a proctology exam in terms of metrics. And a lot of growth investors aren't stepping back and thinking about the big picture in terms of big trends, macro trends, and also how do you swing for the fences? And I think that is one of the benefits and attributes of SoftBank is where they're really looking to build huge companies, and they're willing to kind of back that up with the capital. And I think that just can have some advantages.
But SoftBank's definitely a riddle. I mean, as a growth stage investor, from a day-to-day basis, it doesn't really change our job. I say that if we're looking at the same deal, one of us is looking at the wrong deal. Because if you're a company who can absorb $100 to $300 million, you're probably at a different scale of where we're investing, where we ideally are the first growth check-in. That being said, we do see companies who, no pun intended, I don't necessarily have a vision for how they would put that capital to work, but they're bringing it on board because we've created an ecosystem of haves and have-nots.
Right.
If you're going to be one or the other, you obviously want to be in the have camp.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, your very famous colleague at Benchmark, Bill Gurley, had noted in a recent interview that, quote, if your competitor is going to raise $150 million and you want to be conservative and only raise $20 million, you're going to get run over. So is the answer to play catch-up? I mean, how do you compete? I mean, you can sort of say, it only changes the landscape so much, but I feel like it's been investing these sums so recently in sort of the grand scheme of things too, it's sort of hard to know what the long-term ramifications are going to be.
Look, to your
question earlier, like I do worry about all this capital in the market. Like ultimately what our jobs are is to find opportunities where an entrepreneur can take $1 and turn it into 5 or 10. And then eventually get to some kind of outcomes, get to a liquidity point, and then recognize a return on our capital. And what happens when companies are able to raise so much more capital, it becomes this arms race where everybody ends up spending a lot of money, and if you have one company and they have the 20, and then another company raises 150, then they start spending money on sales and marketing in a way that isn't actually, if you were to think about it on an IRR basis, which is really what you should be thinking about, it's not a good return on that capital. But then they're growing really quickly, and then this company still has to raise capital.
Right.
I mean, they need capital in order to grow, and so then they raise, and it is this terrible thing where you just wonder, how is it all going to end?
Right.
And, I think like there are a lot of companies right now that are very cash consumptive, and it is the era of being one of those companies. Like the Bird versus Lime thing happening right now in the scooter world, like that is to me such a boiling down of everything happening in the kind of, not just Silicon Valley, because Bird is not in Silicon Valley, and Lime is actually a Chinese import. But it's everything happening, and what
maybe that is actually a boiling down of all the things that are happening
that's true.
too, right?
Yeah, that's true. LA,
Yeah.
company.
Oh, right.
And so there are the rare companies like Stitch Fix in our portfolio that just raised $42 million and then built a public company, multi-billion-dollar company. Those are still going to be the prizes, I think, in our minds of like how you can build a company despite all the money happening everywhere else.
Right.
That being said, we should note that there are definitely companies that raise a tremendous amount of capital, and they're able to execute with that capital. They're actually able to put it to work in a way that is really meaningful and efficient. I can pick on one of our own, Slack, is famous for being able to raise capital very well.
And Uber for us.
But does Slack need as much as it's, I mean, of course, Stuart Butterfield has been at the startup game a long time, and maybe he sees something coming, which is why, I mean, he seems to have more money than he needs.
But, and sorry to interrupt, Megan, but like without question that there are some categories where you have a winner take most or winner take all opportunity, which is, fundamentally companies that have network effects or have, like Slack, like Uber. And in those companies, there is a real use for the capital because once you win the market, then you get to this really wonderful place where you can invest a lot less in sales and marketing and really start to reap the profitability of your model. But it takes a very disciplined founder and CEO, an executive team, to be able to operate under those circumstances.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think that, just speaking to founder quality, it is such a fascinating and just uber competitive environment right now, whereas maybe a decade ago, a founder had to have certain skills. And I think now, because of this potential arms race, it doesn't have to be that way, right? If you look at like a Tuft & Needle or a Chewy, right, or a Viva, right, you can build some great companies, Stitch Fix, not raising a ton of capital, but being able to navigate these choices or forks in the road means that the CEO has to not only generally have fantastic product sense, be really smart about technology, be an awesome recruiter. They have to be really smart about understanding the trade-offs when it comes to growth and financial planning and scenarios, and then be a great storyteller as well as building relationships, because being able to tell the story when you're a 1 or 2 year old company to raise $100 million or $300 million it takes a different, I think, a different skill set than what people had 10 years ago.
We could talk about this endlessly. We only have a few minutes left. I did want to ask you, because it's one of the other huge trends sort of impacting the Silicon Valley ecosystem, crypto, ICOs. I feel like last year there was sort of more concern about ICOs. Now there have been a couple of, fraudulent cases that have made headlines, and so
to
I
say
think
the least.
I'm sorry, to say the least, right?
Is,
but I do wonder if we're not paying attention to what's happening globally. I mean, do you think that this is going to impact your work? Is initial coin offerings going to have a meaningful impact on VC?
I thought about it a lot more, I would say, in Q4 of last year. I don't think about it as much right now. I just think that there are a lot of people who've gotten burned by taking an equity or joining a company that was going to have a big ICO but didn't actually have a business and hadn't built the technology yet. And, both, I think financially they haven't worked out, but also people want to work on real products. They want to ship real stuff.
At the growth stage, there's been no impact because, again, that's not the profile of a company that we would invest in. A napkin or a 2-page white paper is not a growth stage investment from a maturity standpoint.
Right.
So even if they're raising growth size rounds, that is not a growth stage company.
Sure.
And so we don't run into that at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of regulatory things that have been happening that have been basically shutting down the ICO market as it existed in late 2017, I guess it was. But they're happening in token sales still. They're just structuring them a little differently. But I think that what people found in that first craze was, this is maybe a little bit of a humble brag, but like this job is really hard. It's really hard to invest in companies and find the ones that succeed. It's not about being, investing in a bunch of different companies and as an index, especially kind of in today's environment. And I think that what we're starting to see with projects like Augur coming out is that the premise or the kind of assumptions driving a lot of these token sales was that you had economic incentives with the blockchain and this kind of ability. There's like this true technological disruption with the blockchain. I mean, I'm a big believer in this space, but those are not sufficient by themselves to create networks, two-side marketplaces, and it's really hard, and you need a company around it. You don't just need code. And so I think that's what's starting to evolve. And my own belief, if I had a crystal ball, is that what's happening now in the ICO market is going to look a lot more like what happened with open source, 10 years ago. It's kind of going to be the open source 2.0, and we're going to have plain vanilla C corps supporting new protocols that will have tokens on the balance sheet to kind of incentivize continued development in that protocol, and we'll have VC right back into this ecosystem.
Well, I'm talking to the head of the SEC San Francisco Bureau in a little bit, so hopefully we'll learn more about this. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Wish we had more time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to break. So I will see you guys back at 4:15. 4:15, and we will be back with the Roblox CEO. See you soon.
When creating a winning app, it all comes down to building great user experiences. No matter what your app does, building mobility services into your app will take the experience to a whole new level, enriching user engagement and increasing customer loyalty. But in today's world, with so many transportation options, delivering a door-to-door solution to your users without leaving your app is a big task. Introducing the Here Mobility SDK, a seamless, fully integrated SDK connecting your app to all transportation services available while remaining within your user experience. The Mobility SDK integrates access to the Here Mobility Marketplace, a global one-stop shop for aggregating mobility services, providing all transports in real time, making it easy for developers and technologists to bring mobility into any app. With the Here Mobility SDK, users will be able to get any transportation service such as taxis, shuttles, buses, trains, bike sharing, you name it. Put mobility into your users' hands. Let them explore, plan, and book their ride without needing to leave your app. Here Mobility, connecting the mobility world.
Carbine is an emergency response platform that gives people the ability to deliver smart and rich data from any kind of devices to call handling systems.
You founded Carbine in 2014. Can you tell us a little bit about what Carbine is and how it functions today?
I founded Carbine in 2014, as you said. The main reason was to help emergency services around the world to get the information they need in case of emergency. All you need to do is to dial 911, 999, depends where you are around the world, or use our different variety of applications. And by tapping one tap, we're immediately delivering all your information, including video streaming, encrypted peer-to-peer, your exact location, all your personal information that you gave us, and some of your medical information. And also we are giving you the ability to chat with the dispatcher in case you cannot speak.
And how did you come up with this idea?
Oh, it's all started in 2013 when I've been robbed in Tel Aviv Beach. When I tried to call the police, the call takers start to ask me, what's your name, where are you, what's happening around you? And I thought to myself, how come that still in the 21st century I need to supply so much information for call takers? And how come that me and you, in these days when we are calling Uber, ordering pizza, they know exactly where we are? And I decided to found Carbine.
What was the technology that you figured out would be able to solve this problem and that underlies the platform of Carbine today?
Currently, we're focusing on we call it time to dispatch. It's the time from the moment person is calling to emergency services up to the moment the call takers are understanding what's happening and sending the service to the field. The first challenge was how can we deliver the information and what kind of information needed to be delivered to the call takers in order to help them understand what's happening. So the first thing is the location. How can we get the location from the devices and stream it into the call-taking system? Second was how can we help the call taker to understand what's happening in the field? So video streaming was the answer, so you can see what's happening in the event. And then we thought about people with disabilities. What's happened if you cannot speak, if you were kidnapped? So we added the chat. This was the first part, but the second part and the most challenging part was all those call-taking systems are legacy. They don't have the ability to show video. They don't have the ability to give you to chat with the person. So we had to build our own call-taking system.
When you're trying to go from legacy systems, municipality by municipality or district by district, how do you really integrate those legacy systems which may vary onto one integrated platform that is Carbine?
So we are not integrating to the current call handling system. We are replacing the call handling systems.
And where have you replaced them to date already?
So we have systems basically all over the world, from Asia to Europe, in Latin America. We also signed our first deal in the United States, and also we have, of course, all over Israel, so it's expanding.
Walk me through how it works.
So basically, with our smart technologies, according to some regulation in specific countries, we are asking you for consent to open your camera location and to share it with the call-taking systems. We have smart technologies that can locate you even in the indoor space within 1 meter accuracy.
How long does it take for you to actually locate me within 1 meter?
It's very fast. It's a matter of seconds.
And what will the future look like if, all the municipalities across the United States and beyond have integrated Carbine?
We are currently focusing on the time to dispatch, how to deliver information from A to B in the most efficient way. But the next phases would be how can you deliver that information to the forces on ground? How can you deliver the information from the person who reported to the hospitals? So the hospitals will get the information from the field and basically will be able to look at the injured person in the field and already prepare the equipment for the person to come. So all this entire ecosystem is very, very huge and very complex around the world, and we have a lot of work to do.
That was designed with the last mile in mind. We do micro-fulfillment centers, smaller than 10,000 square feet, that do fulfillment for e-commerce and grocery space.
There are a lot of moving parts, literally.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about what's happening when you order some eggs, for instance?
Sure.
What are they going to do?
What's going to happen is you're going to order your eggs. We're going to get the order into our micro-fulfillment center. And then the order is immediately going to send tasks to robots. We have multiple types of robots that work in a marvelous dance together in order to get your order picked. So for instance, if your eggs were part of a 60-item order, that would be picked in as little as 10 minutes. And the facility would also be located in the centers of cities so that it can get to you, the end customer, within an hour easily.
Tell me more about the ground robots in particular, because obviously it's quite cute to see them moving around. Are they smart? How do they know where they're supposed to be?
The ground robots are actually kind of stupid, and it's by design. And that's true to all of our robots. So our robots have sensors, they know to drive straight, they know not to hit objects, etc., very basic things. But really, the brain is in what we call the base, which is where we actually have a virtual site and we manage all of the robots, prioritizing all the tasks. So that brain sends the robots tasks and instructions on what to do, go straight, go left, turn right, and they just fill the tasks.
And when they fill a task, they pick up these big blue boxes filled with products. How do you know where the products are and where they're supposed to pick them up?
This is obviously part of the beauty of automation, is that any product that goes into our facility gets scanned and located within a specific tote, and also even within the tote within a specific bin. And our system at any given time knows for every product that came in exactly where it's located, as well as additional information like expiration dates. And it can constantly manage it and move it around to optimize for the movement. So it can think, oh, you're a fast mover, I'm going to put you closer to the touch point so that it takes less time and robot efforts to get to you.
How does it work when you're a new customer? Are you buying robots? Are you buying a service?
Our model is a fulfillment as a service model. Customers would come into an agreement with us, and they would pay us on a per item, per order basis, and we would just fulfill it for them. They'd send us their inventory, they'd send us their order information, and we'd take care of all the rest. We'd take care of the labor, the facility, the robots, the maintenance, everything that's involved to make sure that the customer gets their perfect order.
Why did you originally think about the service approach instead of the technology approach, as you said?
I think it's really to do with where we can bring the most value to the market and how we can expand the market and enable players that otherwise can't.
This video is not sponsored by DJI or Zhiyun. We're doing this comparison vid because we like you guys. So we wanted to step our B-roll game up and get the Ronin M gimbal for our DSLRs, but we're already carrying hella shit and I don't want to add yet another Pelican case to the pile. A bunch of our production friends recommended the Zhiyun Crane 2 as a compact solution. It seemed to be the choice for run-and-gun documentary filmmakers and wedding videographers. We spent a good month with it back in June and loved it. Then DJI came out with the Ronin S, and, well, let's get some test footage and comparisons. Unless you've been operating gimbals for a while, you're not going to get smooth shots on your first try. It'll look like poo-poo. It took us a little practice and some really ugly footage before flying with them became a dance. Weight-wise, the Ronin S is about a pound heavier with an extra pound of payload capacity. We were able to mount the 5D and 35mm on both with no problems. And the weight difference isn't that drastic since the weight distribution is pretty balanced, so it doesn't feel awkward. But once you adjust the tilt, roll, and pan to work with your running and walking shots, it's like butter. I mean, until you accidentally trip walking backwards, like the end. Honestly, both felt similar. It's like the difference between Team Edwards versus Team Jacob. You get it. You get it. You get it. Balancing both gimbals take about the same amount of effort. The levers get stuck sometimes, but once you get the hang of it, you can easily balance them in 2 minutes. One plus with the Ronin S is that you can do a balance test on their app to make sure you don't fuck it up. Otherwise, if improperly balanced, the motor will overwork and you'll kill the battery and eventually kill the motor. For slow, walking cinematic slides and pans, both gimbals excelled. But it was hard shooting Brandon moving up, down, left, right, forwards, and backwards. It's much more difficult to track a fast, dynamic subject. The sports mode on the Ronin S only seemed to work when he wasn't jumping all over the place. No worries though, because nothing a little slow-mo and some editing can't fix. Aw, yeah. One minor issue with the Zhiyun, the menu dial is not intuitive. We kept wanting to press the button in the middle to select our options. You actually have to tap right to select. But the Zhiyun does one-up the Ronin by having a sexier case, and you don't have to play Tetris putting it back in. A minor gripe about both cases, you have to unbalance and shift the levers around in order for it to fit. I just want to run and gun, grab it and go. The Ronin S goes for $699 and the Crane 2 is $50.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage TechCrunch editor and Disrupt MC, Jordan Crook.
Hello. Y'all still feeling good? It helps when you do that really loud slow clap, whoever that was. That's definitely helps. Thank you so much. Let's just all transition to that. Okay, our next guest is essentially the hero of today's youth. Please welcome to the stage from Roblox, David Bazuki, and our moderator, Anthony Ha.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back TechCrunch senior writer and your Battlefield host, Anthony Ha.
David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony.
So just before we get started, let's do a quick poll. Who here has played Roblox? All right, we got a pretty big concentration on the TechCrunch tables, a couple others. How many of you have experienced it, watched a YouTube video or anything like that? All right, a few more. Well, lucky for you, we have a video here that will show off some of the experience. Why don't we watch the video now? Can we throw to the video? right, there you go, the future of entertainment. So, so David, you founded Roblox more than a decade ago. Since then, you've grown it to more than 70 million active users. And this morning, you announced that you had raised $150 million. You did not say anything about valuation, but there's been some reports, including on TechCrunch, that it was more than $2.5 billion. Why did you raise the money?
So first off, thanks for the interview. Thanks for having me out here.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I appreciate it. And the article today was wonderful, so I appreciate it. We see a new category emerging, and it's a category of human experience where people can do things together in 3D environments, whether they go fishing together or learn to work a cash register or run away from a tornado. And, you know, we're shepherds of this new category, and we want to make that category work around the world. So we need to build infrastructure. We need to have money to make this work fast everywhere. So it's part of our vision that Roblox becomes a worldwide platform.
How much of your audience right now is outside the United States?
It's surprisingly large, considering most of the experiences on Roblox run in English. But what our vision is part of this platform is that we're not just making Roblox stuff work in many languages. We have over 2 million developers who build stuff every month. There's over 4 million developers with active experiences right now. And we're giving them the tools so their experiences can run in multiple languages at the same time. So it's kind of our vision of someday kids in the US will go on field trips to China. They'll both be able to communicate and hang out together.
So when you talk about turning this into a global platform, what are kind of the immediate next steps? What are the things that we can maybe expect to see happen in the next few months, next year?
Yeah, the obvious ones would be website, app, all of that stuff runs in many languages, but we're powered by this developer community that make these creations. Some of these developers have made, we don't even call them games, we call them experiences that have been played 1 billion times. And what we need to really do is give these developers the tools so their experiences can be run in multiple languages. So we're kind of like toolsmiths. At mega scale with millions of developers, they can't do all the translating themselves. So we actually have to give them tools so their fan base can help them translate. Kind of like Facebook crowdsourced their translation.
I think when we had talked about the funding earlier, it sounded like China was going to be maybe one of the big priorities as far as global expansion. Is that right?
China's just so big and so different that it's a little bit of a wild card. There's not a lot of social platforms or immersive platforms that allow people around the world and people in China to come together to learn or to create or to meet people of different walks of life. So it's half a vision really to connect China and the US, and then half of it is also a financial and company vision as well.
And so as I mentioned, you have been working on Roblox for quite some time now. It seems like things are going well financially. Have you started to think about potential exits?
We've been fortunate with our current and new investors. They're just awesome that there's a little bit of a trend today where you don't have to go public so soon. You can still provide some liquidity for employees and early investors and stay away from a lot of that public stuff. So we don't really see any plans of having to do it so soon, and we can still bring on great investors and give some liquidity.
But the goal would be to go public.
I think the goal is to create our vision of a new kind of shepherd in this new category of human co-experience, really. As a byproduct, at some point, we will we'll have to go public at some point.
All right, that's a perfectly fair answer.
Yeah.
So let's pull back a little bit from the financials. And you just said that you describe this as an experience, not a game. I mean, obviously, there's a game-like element. So, I mean, again, for the people who haven't experienced it for themselves, just talk a little bit about what the experience is like for the player and for the creator.
Yeah, so on Roblox, there's over 70 million players who have an avatar that they really associate closely with. And the avatar starts to bridge their physical life and their digital life and kind of merge those two realities a bit. We sometimes like to think of Roblox as a training ground for life, and that they can take their avatar, find their friends, And more than just gaming type things, they do things we might do in real life, like work together at a pizza restaurant, which is really popular, or try to, maybe something you can't do in real life, which is try to escape from jail together. They like to do funny stuff like that. So it's very social. It's typically non-competitive. And many of the experiences besides the creator side involve people making up their own worlds, coming up with their own rules. We see a lot of imaginative type things where people will play hide and go seek in an environment that's not made for hide and go seek. We have a lot of environments where there's a lot of learning involved. So one of my favorites is Bird Simulator. And in Bird Simulator, without really knowing it, a lot of our players get to be birds, try to figure out how to survive with their friends. They have to find insects. If they don't, they kind of don't make it. So there's a lot of cool life skill stuff that happens besides the fun.
And so I actually got a chance to talk to one of your new investors, David Z, who apparently his kids and yours had gone to the same school, and so he saw an early demo of this at a science fair.
That's right.
Many, many years ago. I mean, tell me a little bit more about what were you even doing at this science fair?